What's up, guys? We are your young guns, and we're going to be continuing our trade rumors series leading up to the trade deadline. We spoke about John Klingberg in our last video. Things are heating up concerning Evander Kane, which we're going to be covering as soon as the announcement of him signing with either the Edmonton Oilers, Tampa Bay Lightning, Florida Panthers, or maybe the other 10 teams that are interested in him, as he is very much in demand despite what he has done. We'll get to that. I know a lot of people are looking forward to our comments and our thoughts on what's going on with him. But today we're going to be focusing on Ben Chiarot, someone who is highly in demand because of what he's done in the previous playoffs with the Montreal Canadiens. He's a top four defenseman. He's good defensively, and he has somewhat of an offensive upside. Teams are going to be looking at Ben Chiarot because of his experience and because of, he's been always paired up with top pairing guys like Dustin Bufflin when he was with Winnipeg and Shea Weber in his time with the Montreal Canadiens. So what do you guys think, concerning Ben Chiarot and the teams that are linked to him?
I mean, it's definitely interesting with Chiarot. I mean, we look at what he's done this season, even what he's done in the playoffs last year. Like, he had a really good playoffs last year, and obviously there was ups and downs. There's been mixed emotions with Ben Chiarot since he joined the Canadiens 3 years ago, and obviously, he's a defenseman. He's a hard hitting defenseman. He plays very good in the defensive end of the ice. He's not really much of an offensive defenseman or doesn't really produce that many points. But this season he's been okay. And I mean, look, the Habs haven't been that great this year. They've struggled a lot. But he's kind of been one of the brighter spots for the Canadiens, which is a good sign. And obviously, if you're the Canadiens, you're looking to cash out. There's teams like Florida that are interested. There's been talks about St. Louis. I've heard Washington's name in there. I've heard Vegas' name in there as well. And, it looks like it's going to be a bidding war for Ben Chiarot. It looks like a lot of teams are going to be interested in him. The Edmonton Oilers was one that I heard, but now I don't know because, the Oilers kind of have other situations that they're kind of looking at. But, I mean, look, if you're Montreal, you're looking for the best deal possible. You're looking for the best players available or the best draft picks that are going to be available to you based on, what the teams are going to offer. But I think Ben Chiarot's going to make any team that he goes to, a better team at the end of the day. And, you look at what he did in the playoffs last year and all the success he had and the success the Canadiens had, it kind of, it showed on the ice. It translated to on the ice, and Chiarot was a big part of the reason why the Canadiens, were successful last year, even if they just fell short of the
as of right now, Frank Savarelli has confirmed that the Panthers, Blues, Golden Knights, Avalanche, Capitals, New York Rangers all have shown heavy interest in Ben Chiarot. The two dark horses are Boston and Minnesota, so we're going to be covering all these teams and why they are good potential fits for Ben Chiarot and why they would be interested in his services. But I also wanted to add that Chiarot has some control of where his next destination is going to be because he has a 10-team no trade list, and he's going to be able to shift where he wants to go out of the teams that are interested in him. But the good thing about this is that he has a lot of contenders interested in him, so he's going to have a lot of good options to choose from. I also wanted to mention that John Klingberg has a no trade clause, so he could be moved to whatever team Dallas decides to trade him to. I forgot to mention that in yesterday's episode, so sorry about that. But so let's start off with the Florida Panthers and why we think Ben Chiarot would be a perfect fit for them.
Chris, you can go first.
Well, I mean, there's the abundance of prospects that they have. They have draft picks, which they could give up. They have a lot of those too, and he's cap friendly. I mean, he's cheap. He could be either a rental or they could sign him long term. The one piece that they do really miss is missing. Sorry, is a defenseman, and I think a defenseman of Ben Chiarot's how can I say this skill is really what they need. They need like a tough guy. They need a big guy, and they need someone who could put it in the net. And they needed someone who could make the big hits in the playoffs. And I think that would be a great asset for any team. But Florida seems to have the most things to give up.
in
without
our
hurting their
Florida
franchise.
in our Florida video, we mentioned, that they have a very underrated defensive core, but which is led by Mackenzie Weegar and Aaron Ekblad. But adding a guy like Ben Chiarot solidifies the defensive core that they have because it adds another top four pairing guy and playoff experience. And Ben Chiarot, like I mentioned before, he knows what it takes to play with guys like Dustin Bufflin and Shea Weber because he's been paired up with them for a significant amount of time. And as of right now, the Panthers discussed internally whether they will make an offer to the Canadians. But the question is, that what are they willing to offer for Ben Chiarot? I know there was one of the Florida Panther fans commented in our Florida Panthers video that Owen Tippett or Vetrano would be good assets to head towards
Um,
Montreal since they have so much depth concerning the forwards, and you know don't move a guy like Hornquist because of his playoff experience, and you're gonna need someone like that heading into the playoffs. So
I,
thanks for that suggestion. I think it surely makes sense to a certain degree. But I'm really curious what Florida would give up for Ben
I
Chiarot.
I think. I mean, look, the issue with Florida, and obviously I know that they're interested in Sherrod. The issue with Florida is that they don't have their first round pick this year, right? And I know that the asking price for Ben Sherrod
Well,
going in,
listen, let's be honest. I don't mind if it's next year's first round.
but here's the other thing too, right? So here's my little thing that I'm going to say. Um, Regardless of the fact that whether it's this year or next year's first round pick, the Canadians, they have a decision to make with Ben Sherrod. And obviously, you look at the draft this year, you're kind of, if you're the Canadians, you want to be able to grab, more than one draft pick. And with Ben Chiarot, at the end of the day, he's your most prized asset in terms of value at the moment, right? Because let's face it, there are other guys on the team that, you could probably get more for. But I'm talking about in terms of a pure rental and what the prices of rentals are and what they've always been. Ben Chiarot has the highest value in terms of, rental value or whatever. And so with Florida, they have the prospects and they have the players. The question is more of a situation of, okay, what's Montreal gonna ask for, right? Because the way I looked at it, and based on what the analysts were saying, is that apparently Montreal's asking price or what they're expecting from Ben Chiarot is a first round pick and a prospect. And to me, a prospect of a decent caliber. So a guy
He
like
will
Owen
get that.
Tippett,
I'm
huh?
telling you, there's going to be a bidding war for Ben
But that's what
Chiarot
I'm saying.
because you have
But
to
that's
look
what I'm
at
saying.
the three top defensemen available: John Klimberg, Ben Chiarot, and Jacob Chikrin. Who's going to cost you the least concerning value and assets? Ben Chiarot. Not only that, Ben Chiarot, you know, is underrated in my opinion, despite what the Habs fans or whoever's looking at him has to say about him. I think he's a very underappreciated player on the Montreal Canadiens, and he had a fantastic playoff run with the Habs last year. So when
What
you
did we pick him up for? I think it was something really like ridiculous.
we signed him because his contract was done with the Winnipeg Jets, and
Yeah.
the Habs were able to sign him to a 3-year deal, if I'm
Look,
not mistaken.
No, we traded for him. I'm
no,
pretty
we didn't.
sure.
We
No, that
signed
was
him.
that was Joel Edmondson that we traded for.
No, it was Joel Edmondson, and the Winnipeg deal was Joel Armia. It was the Armia deal that we got Armia from the trade in Winnipeg. It wasn't Sherrod. Sherrod was a free agent signing.
Yeah,
But
Really?
yeah, but
yeah.
anyways, going back to Ben Sherrod, and I think, look, to be honest, I don't think he's a fit. I'm not saying he's not a fit in Florida. I think there's other teams in the NHL that I think are more interesting and are more intriguing.
Let's move on
Based
to the
on
Edmonton
Ben Sherrod.
Oilers because they're
The Edmonton Oilers is the
interesting.
one that I want to talk about, and the reason why I want to talk about them is because obviously Ken Holland came out today and said, "Oh, I'm not trading my first round pick and I'm not trading my prospects." But buddy, let's be honest with each other here. If your team's battling for a playoff spot, you need a goalie. You
Well, they're
need
not
defense.
at the moment.
No, but they're still battling for a playoff spot. They're not in it, but they're battling for one. They're kind of fighting for one, and so you're in a situation where you've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, right? And they're kind of hitting, they're at the best parts of their career. You don't want to have a situation where you miss the playoffs. And Ken Holland can say whatever he wants. We all know he's going to go and make trades. They're already interested in bringing in Evander Kane, so clearly he wants to do something He wants to make more than just that move, and I don't think Evander Kane's going to change Edmonton's goalie or defensive problems. But that's besides the point.
It's gonna
We're
add
not here.
more goals,
Yeah,
and I think it completes their top six. But we're gonna be talking about that
Make them
when the
more
news is
aggressive
official.
too. I
that's
mean, you
it.
have Zach
But
Cassian
anyways,
and Evander Kane.
back
But
back.
you look at their defense. Evan Bouchard stepped up in place for Oscar Klefbom, who's been injured for the past 2 seasons. So like they have good defensive prospects there. And you have Nurse, who really stepped up his game since last
I don't know
season.
why they gave up Ethan Bear though. Is that
I don't.
why would
I
they let him go?
I don't know. It was kind of controversial when he got traded and stuff. But we're not gonna get into that because that's off topic. But
No, I know. I was just curious, but
yeah, but
I'm gonna be honest here. If there's one team I really want that the Habs make a deal with, is St. Louis, and this is why. Okay, because I know the asking price for Ben Chiarot's really high, and I know people were saying, well, from what I heard, like you guys said, it's a first round pick and a prospect,
Yeah,
and like not just
yeah,
some prospect, like a decent one.
yeah.
What if it was just a 1-for-1 trade, which Montreal is known for, and we get a player who's NHL ready and he's doing pretty good
No,
this season, and
no.
he's
well,
young?
I'm gonna get
They
into St.
wouldn't
Louis,
make
but
that deal.
just to get like into St. Louis in a second because I have a lot to say concerning that because I did some research
Yeah,
and
you
I could
finish
add
it.
to your prospect that you're mentioning. But just to conclude the
Okay.
Edmonton segment, Tyson Barry also stepped up too, and they were able to sign him to an extension. So pairing up Sherrod with Tyson Barry or Evan Bouchard would be, I think, fantastic to close up the top four.
No,
Um, Not only that, but like you look at Barry, you look at Nurse, they're more offensive players. Even though Nurse does have defensive qualities, Barry's not really known for his defensive abilities. Evan Bouchard is known for his defensive abilities and he has offensive upside. But Sherratt would be able to play more of a defensive role with the Edmonton Oilers. So that completes our top four. But the thing is that they need to be hunting for a goaltender as of right now. They're going after you guys like
but
Evander Kane, Ben Chiarot, but their goaltender is the issue right now.
But
So I think they should address that first.
like I mentioned in other videos, in my opinion, when a GM builds a team, I honestly do believe that the defense is way more important than offense.
yes, yes.
But you can make an argument that you could have a stacked offense and a decent defense, and your goalie could be mediocre and still win the cup. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna bring this point again. If Tampa Bay had no Vasilevsky, would they still win the Stanley Cup? Yes, they will.
No, they
Or
wouldn't.
they would. They
No,
would.
they wouldn't.
They have. They.
Anyways, that's another
Come on, man.
story for another day. But the point is that going back to the Ben Chiarot situation, Edmonton's got assets that they can trade for Ben Chiarot, and I disagree. Yes, Edmonton need a goalie, yes, but they also need defense because let's be honest. Yes, Darnell Nurse is good. Tyson Berry's not good defensively. Duncan Keith hasn't really been it, and the Oilers don't
Wow.
have defensive depth.
I think he's played good, but you have to look at the fact that he did have COVID at one point. He was injured at one point.
He's also
Yeah,
like
he's up there in
30.
age,
Yeah,
but like I think
37.
he's not only brought leadership, but he's brought somewhat of consistency to the defensive core when healthy.
Yeah,
But
I guess.
adding a guy like Ben Chiarot that is somewhat, younger in terms of age, of course, is obviously going to make their defensive core so much better, in my opinion. But adding to just moving on from Edmonton and going back to St. Louis, because you brought up a good point. I think the St. Louis Blues could either offer like their first rounder, of course, but you mentioned a good point with a good prospect, right? So
Well,
the two good prospects could be Klim Kostin or
uh,
Simon Robertson.
none of the guys I wanted to talk about. It's
Travis.
more of a guy who's on the team right now and he's playing really well. I don't know if they listen. I don't watch the
I
same.
know who it is. I know who you're talking about.
I
Jordan
don't
Cameron,
watch
right?
who? No,
You're
not
talking
Jordan Canada. They would never get rid of him. I'm
Okay,
thinking
'cause I
more
thought
Robert Thomas.
that's an interesting one too.
I feel
That's
like
possible. It's
that
possible.
would be a solid and
But
he was linked to Pacioretty a while ago too.
yes,
So listen, well, I
but
mean, it's not Bergevin taking care of the team anymore, thank God. But
but
now with sorry,
Jeff
Jeff
Gordon.
with Jeff Gordon, whoever he's going to be hiring. It seems to me like he was mentioning in the press conference that they care about analytics and they want to get more speed and they want to get fast, younger. And the kid's 22. He's doing pretty decent. I mean, he's got 27 points in 29 games. Is almost a point per game player. He's 22, and he's a centerman,
I
and he could play the
honestly
wing.
like it is a good
So,
asset. Honestly, I would love to have him on the team, but I don't think they're willing to give him up. I like I
what
mentioned,
for a one for one?
I don't think
No
that
picks
happens for
giving
a
up.
rental. Unless they sign to an if they have the intention of signing to an extension, that's a different story. But if they purely want him based as a rental, then there's no way to give him up. I see them giving up a first rounder and one of those two prospects I mentioned, Robertson or Costin, which are somewhat of like a B to like C prospect. And yeah, and I think that's the type of deal that St. Louis would make with them. But where does he fit on the St. Louis Blues? Well, I think since he's a strong two-way defenseman to a certain degree. He could play with a guy with like Perieko. Also, he could also complement Justin Falk as well. Like we mentioned in the John Klinberg video, they were able to replace um, Bomeister with Tori Krug. They were able to replace Edmondson with Falk, but they haven't replaced Pietrangelo. I know John
Yeah,
Klimberg would
but
be a better
Sherrod's not really a
a
Petrangelo
100%. I know John
replacement.
Klimberg would fit the team better, but in terms of value, it's gonna cost him a lot less to acquire a guy like Ben Chiarot.
Yeah.
So yes, he's not a Petrangelo, of course, but he solidifies their top four in concerning defense. They already have a stacked offensive team. They have a good goaltender, and they have two backup goalies that are pretty decent. They have Huso and they have Charlie Lindgren battling out for a backup spot. So I think the only thing they really have to add to be legit contenders, which I think they are, regardless if they add no one, is a defenseman. And Ben Chiarot would be a perfect asset for them to include on that Stanley Cup
Who
contending team.
to me, look, you look at St. Louis, right, and you brought up the two prospects that you brought up, but Chris brought up a good point before too, and he was like, oh, and I kind of shut it down, but now I realize because I'm like, there's one prospect that I think a lot of people would be interested in. And I'm not saying that this would happen because I know that St. Louis thinks highly of him, but he had a really good career in college. I could see a situation where Ben Chiarot gets traded for a guy like Scott Perunovich. And Scott Perunovich, he was a rookie defenseman. He was drafted by St. Louis, whatever. He won the Hobey Baker Award a couple of years ago. He's a very highly touted prospect. And for the Canadians, you look at a guy like Scott Perunovich, for example. He's yes, he's played a few games in the NHL. He's dominated the AHL. He's been very good in the AHL. A guy like that, in Montreal, he's a puck moving defenseman. He's an offensively minded defenseman, and he's young. For a guy like Ben Chiarot, I think if you're the Canadians, maybe you explore that option instead of maybe going for a draft pick or whatever. You're getting a really good prospect who can help you on your team now. He can develop whatever, and then you just keep stuffing your defense cupboard, your prospect defenseman cupboard with more prospects. I really like him. I'm a big fan of Scott Perunovich. I think that could be a situation that Montreal explores. I don't know if St. Louis does it. I don't think they do because I think they think highly of him. But, we talked about players that we can trade one for one, in a deal like that because of how high the market is for rentals. And just, I think there's going to be a bidding war with Chiarot. I could see a situation where St. Louis may be like, you know what, we'll overpay or we'll do this or we'll do that, especially if they want to win another Stanley Cup because Chiarot can help, St. Louis win another Stanley Cup.
There's two teams I want to get into specifically,
Me
but
too.
before we get to them, I just want to get rid of like two teams which I don't think they're gonna acquire him, and sorry, three teams: Colorado Avalanche, the Washington Capitals, and Golden Knights. I want to breeze through them because
Yeah,
there's
Honestly,
they're
well,
not gonna go.
hear me out. Do you think? Uh, well, about Colorado, I don't know if this is. Well, I mean, it's probably old news now, but didn't Girard want out?
yeah, they're linked to him, but I don't know
Yes,
how a deal
that's
would work out with
that
them.
would never work.
Gerard is better than Sherrod. Let's be honest here.
Yeah,
Um, so adding Sherrod as a pure rental because there's no way he would
Well,
resign
no,
in Colorado
why not? They're contenders. Why wouldn't you want to stay there?
because there's cap space. They have to resign people. I don't think they can
Yeah,
make
but
it
you
work.
guys really think he's gonna get a $6 million contract
plus,
next season?
look, Colorado. The thing with Colorado is that they've already kind of got their top four defensemen. They don't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the only thing I was thinking of was maybe Gerard if they want,
Yeah,
but
no,
like
I don't think.
Yeah,
I don't think that happens.
but
I don't
yeah,
think that.
it wasn't
let's
on my
move.
radar. The
Yeah,
the
let's.
team the team that I really want that I wanted to like mention to bring up right now was the Winnipeg Jets. I feel like there could be a reunion.
Well, look,
I could see that. I mean, they're out of the playoffs right now, though, Jets. But they're a
look.
team that, if they want to bring in another defenseman like that, and if they're really commit. The thing with the Jets though is like, are they really going to make a cup run? Right? They fired Paul Maurice, quit on them. They have an interim coach. They've kind of been up and down. Obviously, they've dealt with COVID and stuff too. But a guy like Ben Chiarot, I think going back to Winnipeg, it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, what's Winnipeg's plan going into these
Ben
playoffs?
Chiarot going back to
They
Winnipeg
expect him
is
to win
more
the
of
cup.
like an
I don't
off-season
know.
thing where he's gonna
Well,
sign an extension with them
here,
and he's gonna retire there, for example. But
here's
we're
the
talking
thing.
about pure rental.
I
And
didn't know he had no move clause. So now, like that's why I didn't want to I didn't want to mention him before. I'm really hoping St. Louis or Florida. I would prefer St. Louis like gets him and we get stuff in return from them. But Winnipeg would make sense. But now that he has a no move clause, would he really want to like go back to like what he did in the
I'm
past? I don't know if he wants to
the
move
the only
on or
way he
whatever.
goes back to Winnipeg is during the offseason as a free agent signing with them. But if he wants a legit cup run, he's not gonna go to Winnipeg. But yes, Winnipeg has been really bad defensively ever since he left and Dustin Bufflin left the team. They haven't been able to have that strong defensive core since both those guys left the team. Yeah, they brought in Dylan. They brought in what's his name? Schultz?
Schmidt.
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 Sorry, yeah, Schmidt. But it's still not good enough. They need, adding going back to a guy like Sherrod. I think it just doesn't make sense right now. But maybe during the off season, it would make a little bit more sense. But yeah, another team I would like to. Two teams I want to get rid of before we go to the last three teams. And there's a lot of teams to talk about because there's so much
I
interest.
mean,
In
I mean, we can kind of just breeze through it. I mean, look, at the
yeah,
end of
I
the
want to
day,
I want to breeze through Vegas and Washington.
Oh,
Those
Well, I
are
mean,
Vegas,
two
there's no
teams.
chance they pick
at
him
the
up.
end of the day, like Chris said, like Vegas, I don't see a situation, especially with Eichel and all their cap situation. I don't see a
Yeah,
situation where Vegas takes him.
They're trying to get
Washington,
Ryan Kessel.
Washington's a
Kessel,
little
yeah,
bit.
Ryan
yeah,
Kessel.
yeah,
Washington's a
yeah.
little bit of a
You mean Phil
situation.
Kessel?
No, they're trying to get
Ryan
Ryan
Kessler's
Kessler's contract so that
contract.
they could put him on LTIR and have cap
Yeah.
space.
But anyways,
Okay,
Smart,
okay,
those
smart.
guys.
Yeah.
Washington, I don't
So
see.
we
I
all
don't see.
agreed that he's not going to
No
Vegas and he's not
chance.
going to
No chance.
Washington.
No, I don't see them.
Washington, no.
Not
Unless
even.
Okay.
like they offer us something
Unless something
ridiculous.
happens, right? But I don't. Unless they want to give us Hendrix Lapierre, I don't think that's
So
gonna
let's move on to the three teams where I want to like really go in depth to conclude the episode. Minnesota, Boston, and the New York Rangers.
Okay, We're gonna start with Minnesota because I want to say something, and it brought up a good point. Yeah, well, today they signed John Merrill, which is a good signing for them. He's played very well for them. What I
Under
like
$2
about
million,
Minnesota,
pretty cheap for them for 3 years.
what I like about Minnesota is they've got a decent decor, but the problem with Minnesota, right, is you've got Spurgeon, you've got Matt Dumba, you've got Jonas Brodin.
Isn't Spurgeon injured long term though?
I'm not sure about that actually, but anyways, they have their top 4D. If Spurgeon is injured long term,
I could second he is injured long
okay,
term.
okay, so
Okay.
he's injured long term, so that's a good move. And the reason why it's a good move is because now you've got a situation where a guy that can replace Jared Spurgeon could be Ben Chiarot. And what helps with Minnesota is that they've got the prospects as well to do it. They've got the picks to do it as well. But what's interesting about that whole situation is that even when Jared Spurgeon comes back, Minnesota's going to have a really good decor to help them go into the playoffs, right? And with Brodin, with Dumba, with
And what's their cap
Goligoski.
situation? Do they have money to fit him?
Well, listen, they have $10 million. Sorry,
Yeah.
$10 million. They have almost they have a lot of money because Kirill Kaprizov's on IR and Spurgeon is on IR.
Well, Kaprizov should be back soon, but even at that,
They have like 16.5 million in IR.
even at that,
I think they could definitely fit him.
Sherrod's contract is not that expensive.
Yeah,
at the
3 million.
moment for them not to be able to take a contract like that. So I don't think it's necessarily a worry when it comes to Minnesota. I like Minnesota. I think it's a good fit for him. The one that I think is a really good fit, and I talked about it, and I kind of like was thinking about it a little bit more today. The New York Rangers. I think that's the one for me that if he doesn't end up
That's
going,
why I want him to go because of what we could get in return.
well, what's interesting about Chiarot is because I think in a team like New York, and because of the fact that they've done so well, you've got Gerard Gallant over there who's done a really good job, and I think he can coach Chiarot and do really well. But what's interesting about Chiarot and the Rangers is I feel like the Rangers would be interested. But also Jeff Gordon, that's Jeff Gordon, his old team, right? So he knows a few of those guys that play on the Rangers. He knows a few of the prospects that he drafted. And I can see a situation where he goes to New York. He's like, you know what? Give me some of let me reunite with some of the guys that I brought in. I'll bring them to Montreal. So there's definitely a possibility for the Rangers over there. And I think even for that, not just because of the fact the Rangers are the prospects, but Chiarot would be a fantastic fit in New York. I think he really would.
Listen, as long as we don't get Capo Caco, I'm all good for it. So
Before going to the Rangers, I just want to say what the Minnesota Wild would be willing to give up. Um, Obviously, a first round pick attached to a B or C leveled prospect, but apparently they don't mind. They have a surplus of top prospects, and I don't think they would mind giving up one of their top prospects. Not obviously not Marco Rossi, for example, or not. What's their goaltender that's supposed to be good? Wilstad, whatever his name is. Is that the goaltender they have from Sweden?
uh, it's I can't find that. I'm on Cap Friendly right now. I can't see that.
Well, the guy from Lucas should know this.
For what? Sorry?
Shesterkin.
No, I'm talking about the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah.
But what are you talking about? I
I'm
forgot.
Sorry,
saying
talking
like
about the Wild. Okay, my
yeah,
bad.
I'm going back to them because this is like what they're willing to give up. I didn't get the chance to add that. So like I'm gonna repeat myself once again. First round pick with a B or C leveled prospect attached to it, or one of their top prospects, but it's not gonna be Marco Rossi, obviously not. And
Or Boldy or Wallstead.
yeah, there you
Wallstead.
go. Well said. And it's not gonna
I
be
think
one of
Sorry, I
those
was
two
looking at
guys.
the Rangers. I was like, what
no.
goalies
No.
prospect
I
do they
mean,
have?
honestly, man, I don't really know. I think Minnesota, they're not afraid to make trades. They're not afraid to make big moves. We know Bill Guerin, he's got balls, and that's what I kind of like about him too. He's not afraid to go out there and make some trades. But even at that, at the end of the day, Minnesota's got too many good prospects coming up in their system that the only way I think they make it work is if they trade a pick because, like you said, I don't see a situation where they trade Marco Rossi. I don't see a situation where they trade Matt Boldy, and I don't see a situation where they trade Jesper Wallstead. And those are kind of Minnesota's three best prospects. So you're taking those guys away. What other guys are there that Montreal can get that'll help them for the future? That's kind of like a lock, right? Because there really isn't that many.
Well,
With the
listen,
Rangers,
we're also
there's a lot.
leaving out the fact that we could not get a prospect and just get maybe a first, a second, or maybe a first and a third.
But not all teams are willing to give up a first, and not all teams have a first, so they're gonna have no
I get it, but there's a few teams that we were
no chance.
mentioning that we're talking about that
What are
have
they gonna give up
picks.
essentially, right? So they're gonna be forced to give
Just the
up a
first.
prospect. But
And I'm
concluding
gonna
with
be honest, I would rather have picks next year than this year.
and
Next year is
considering
pretty loaded.
and considering the New York Rangers, the Canadians have shown interest in Kravtsov.
It's true.
I could see a situation where he gets added into a deal for Sherrod. I could see that
Did
happening.
his value decrease because of what happened?
Well,
Yes,
he
a little
requested
bit.
a trade, so
Yeah, but I think he
So
also because of the fact that he went to Russia and he's not playing in the NHL, I think it doesn't help that situation either, right? But I don't know. To be honest, I think I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna just kind of finish this off right over here. To be honest, I think the best fit for Sherrod is the Rangers. I kind of hope he goes to the Rangers because I think it's the best fit for them, and I think for the Canadians as well. They're kind of just doing what they have to do.
So I think they would add Kravtsov, and I think they would add an additional pick with that.
Yeah,
Whether if it's a
maybe.
second or a first, I don't really know what they're willing to add to a prospect like that. But there's one more team. I'm just gonna breeze through them really
Yeah,
quickly. We mentioned them yesterday. The Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins. I know they're division rivals. I know it's really unlikely, but maybe Boston's gonna have to give up a little bit more because they're division rivals and they need a top four defenseman. I think they're gonna look at Klinberg and Chikrin first, but if they lose out to those two guys for those two guys, I think they're gonna be forced to add a guy like Ben Chiarot, and they're gonna have to be willing to give up more because they're in the same division.
you know what I would do if I were a GM of the Montreal Canadiens? I would ask for just a first round pick for Ben Chiarot from Boston, but I want a first round pick for 3 years from now. That's what I
why?
would do. because they're
Why?
going to be garbage in 3 years from
Yeah,
now.
but the thing is that the draft in 3 years from now is not like, look, if you're Montreal, to be honest, no offense to any Bruins fans out there, but I have a feeling that by next year the Bruins are not going to be great. So if you're talking about wanting
This
just
is their
after
last
next
chance
year's
to win the
draft
cup, in
pick,
my opinion.
and in my opinion, bro, either you take
Next 3 years
there's
from
no
now, so 2024.
no,
Well,
I
I
would
mean,
say
we're
I
in
wouldn't even go to
2022.
20. I
My
wouldn't
bad.
even go to.
2 years
I would
ago.
ask for next year's draft
I
pick,
would
to
go
be
for 20
honest.
if you're gonna go.
Really? Next year?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah.
because they're going to be horrible.
They'll
There's
miss the playoffs.
there's
I think.
potential that Bergeron may not resign because he's thinking of retiring. There's rumors about that. Tuukka
Yeah,
Rask, he just signed a contract of Boston for 1 year. He's done because Swayman and Allmark are going to be their the goaltenders moving forward. Their defensive core is depleted. They heavily rely on McAvoy. Yes, I spoke crap about Grizzlick, and he got 5 points his last game.
Literally the last game, yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, whatever. I'm sorry about that. I guess I ate my own words. But yeah, they need a top four
Maybe.
defenseman to help up McAvoy and Grizzlick now that
I
he's
agree.
somewhat good now. But yeah, that concludes this episode. I know there's a lot of teams interested in Ben Chiarot. We tried our best to
There's
skim through
probably more that we
everybody.
didn't even mention.
Yeah, there's probably more, but these are the ones that we definitely know that either needed top four defensemen like Ben Chiarot or have been officially linked to Ben Chiarot. So thank you so much, guys. Once again, I hope these videos are not way too long for you, but stay with us. There's a lot of things we're going to be talking about moving forward. A lot of teams that are interested in moving assets for caliber players, and we're going to be continuing this series. As we go on leading up to the trade deadline in March. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, check out other content that we've posted. And yes, I know we mentioned that we're going to talk about the Calgary Flames and the Minnesota Wild and the Ducks in previous
Yeah,
videos in our Why Are They So Good series. But because there's so much news coming out concerning trades and stuff, we had to take a break and get back to them once the trade deadline's done. But we'll cover them eventually. But
yeah.
thank you so much, guys, once again. Until the next episode.